All right. Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday from Mission Impact Strategies. Couldn't be more excited to engage with you all today on a topic that no matter what kind of organization you're leading or helping to lead, couldn't be more relevant, and that's thriving through adversity. Um, a lot of our organizations are swimming through uncharted waters, and what's to come is also unknown. And the most important thing is to be proactive and to have plans and strategies and tactics in place to be able to not just survive and stay afloat, but to thrive, to grow, because we know that in any time of uncertainty, in any time of potential challenge, there are incredible opportunities that exist. And some organizations that are positioned right will be the ones that will capitalize on that. So super excited today. We always start with a little bit of a explanation into mission impact strategies. We're a team of strategists, Florida centric, but we work on projects all over the US and beyond, focus on the impact sector. And that's nonprofits, that's mission focused companies, and that's also local governments that are focused on solving social issues, organizations that want to make big moves, double in size, build out new programs that they've never executed on before to do really big things. And it's, I'm sure it'll come through. It's a passion of ours. It's not a job at all. And we love helping organizations kind of meet untapped potential in the areas of philanthropy, communication, both internal and external, coalition building, sustainability, and we also love coaching leaders. And if that's you and you want to talk a little bit more about that in depth, we'd love to connect with you anytime for a quick impact session to hear about kind of what you're tackling and what, more importantly, what you want to tackle in the next season of your leadership. Um, Core team here, myself, our wonderful chief of staff, Amy Armstrong, Andre Bailey, and of course, um, the man that brings the flavor to our organization, the man that sprinkles in the spice, Clayton Lewis Farrar, who's going to be our leading the way. I'm going to be passing the metaphorical mic over to my dear friend and colleague Clayton. He's got an incredible background. Clayton, I hope you'll kind of start by just sharing a little bit on just your adventures over the last 20 years in strengthening communities all around the globe. Um, I love your heart for this topic, and I know you're really going to add a lot of value and bring it not only strategically, but in a super tactical way. And thanks for all you do, my friend. I'm passing it over to you, going off camera, and we can't wait to learn.
Awesome. Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Amy and thank you to Andre and of course, Chris, our guest today. I'm really honored to be a part of Mission Impact Strategies. And I joined this group because I love huge, audacious, difficult problems. And for myself, just to share a little bit about who I am, as was said, I'm Clayton Lewis Ferrara. I'm a biologist, but I've been in the nonprofit world for most of my life. I'm someone who started out in the nonprofit scene as a volunteer, as a preteen. And I remember one of the very first pitches that I ever did was to convince the team at a sea turtle hospital to let me start volunteering there when I was 12, when you had to be 13 in order to start. And lo and behold, when I convinced them and they let me start shadowing their team and even their executive director, it put me on this track to change my whole life. Everywhere I look in society, and especially in the work I do as a biologist, because that's what my formal training is in, I found nonprofits. Nonprofits at the front lines of conservation, on sustainability, on animal welfare, in research, stopping species from going extinct, a multitude of things that just made me feel as though there was hope. And as we'll learn today, right, hope isn't a strategy, but it certainly is a resource. And so today I bring to you a lot of experience from deep within my life in starting many organizations. In some of my consulting work, I've launched over 200 nonprofits now, and also have the extraordinary pleasure of being CEO of a United Nations accredited NGO called Ideas for Us that you'll hear a little bit more about today from some of the examples that we're going to share with you. Next slide, please. All right, so what makes me qualified to talk to you all today about organizational uncertainty, crisis, and chaos, and bringing in my counterpart, Chris Castro here, who is just as esteemed in understanding this as I am? Well, it's because I'm from what I jokingly call the chaos sector of what is our environment. And it is the fact that there's so much going on in the environment right now and in sustainability. Most people don't even know what sustainable development is. They think that it's just tree hugging and solar panels. And as wonderful as that is, it is so much more than that. It is bringing together economic development, social development, and pulling people out of poverty. And it is also doing very, very meaningful environmental work to set up the world for a better, brighter, more biodiverse tomorrow. And you can see from this kind of image here that many of the things that we do in our work with Ideas for Us require the intersectionalities of so many things. We work with elected officials from former US presidents all the way through to our elected officials at the federal level in Senate and Congress, down to local, state level in senators and representatives, down to even more local of mayors and commissioners, and so on. We also work with many, many different companies and policymakers and everyday people. And it really is everyday people that this extraordinary opportunity exists in, as you'll see today, to not only get your organization through the uncertainty, but also to bolster it to achieve more than you ever thought possible. So again, I'll be bringing all of this experience to the perspectives that we'll be sharing today. Next slide, please. Okay, so let me just kind of frame this conversation here, what we're going to talk about, right? I wanted to share some brief personal aspects of this context and really just acknowledge this uncertainty that we're all facing. So let's do that. For starters, let me speak to everyone who's on the call today who is currently working for, a founder of, an executive of, a board member of a nonprofit organization, as well as anyone who will be watching this in the future on YouTube. Thank you for the tremendous work that you do. Nonprofits are businesses turned up to ultra hard mode. When I launched for-profit companies in my life after nonprofits, I was blown away at how easy they were in comparison. A nonprofit has so many more verticals of complexity of dealing with the public, with volunteers, with clients and customers and governmental officials, with donors. The list goes on and on. School systems, the depth and complexity that nonprofit leaders have to navigate is difficult on a good day. But 2025 has certainly been filled with tremendous unknowns. Many people have had grants frozen. Each day I'm saddened at how many layoffs and requests for help in finding employment I receive on LinkedIn and through my social channels. It is a lot. So I just want to hold space for the aspect that these are difficult times, and that in difficult times, it's very important to not lose sight of that North Star that got you here in the first place. So we really have to ask ourselves, right? Like, how do we stay true to our mission and thrive when everything feels messy? Well, to talk about that today, I'm really honored to bring on a partner in change and also one of my very best friends in the whole world. It is not often that I get to introduce him, but let's go to the next slide here and I'll do my best. Oh, okay. Yes. I also wanted to say this. We're also going to bestow a little bit of Chinese wisdom on everybody today, right? Way back, from the Confucius era. And Sun Tzu says, in the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. And we will see how deep that goes. This is one of the themes we're going to talk to you about today. Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. All right. So, our format for those who may be joining for the first time in these Mission Impact Strategies discussions, not only do we want you to hear from our amazing team of impact strategists, but we also bring in someone from the community who is doing things, is a subject matter expert, is running their own organization with particular perspectives, or helping nonprofits navigate. Because after all, this is very much so about bringing together perspectives to help you, our audience, and potential clients. So I'm so excited to introduce Chris Castro. Chris is the Executive Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer at Climate First Bank. He is a former presidential and mayoral appointee. He is a serial ecopreneur and also a dad of two wonderful girls. So, Chris, welcome. It is wonderful to have you. Thank you for making the time today. I know how extraordinarily busy you are. But before I introduce yourself, I do just want to say that this has certainly been a bizarre, I'd say, year for you, certainly, in the aspect that, for those who may not know, Chris was appointed by the former presidential administration, was the youngest head in the Department of Energy to hold the role that he did, and to plan essentially the rollout of the Inflation Reduction Act to the tune of multitudes of billions of dollars. And of course, now in the situation that we're in with the current administration, a lot of Chris's work has been in danger of stalling. But Chris is not going to let that stop him. And I think that what I'm most excited about is how you have been able to leverage the most successful bank in American history since 2008's meltdown to now power the climate movement forward and to pick up the slack of many of the financial models that were making the sustainability transition work, and that you've now been able to position this extraordinary company and extraordinary programs with more to come, and to keep moving forward. And I think that's really the theme of today. So I just wanted to share that you are a living example of some of the skills and the
Hmm.
grit, right, that we hope to inspire people with and teach them today. So with that, Chris, I'll turn it over to you and welcome.
Thank you, Clay. My goodness, it's great to be here with you. It's great to be with everybody on the line. And yeah, I think this topic of navigating adversity is something that I'm living and have been living certainly this year, but over the many years of doing this work. Again, just very briefly, my name is Chris Castro. I'm the founding director, executive vice president, and chief sustainability officer here at Climate First Bank. And if you haven't heard of us, we're a values-based bank committed to environmental and social impact, which we'll hear more about in today's conversation. But in addition, I'm a proud partner in change with Clayton and our nonprofit Ideas for Us, and the amazing work that's happening through the network. So over the last 17 years, you'll see that I've devoted time, talent, and treasure to advancing solutions that help people and nature thrive together. And this has given me such a wide range of different experiences that cut across grassroots activism and community organizing when I was a student at the University of Central Florida, to launching my own nonprofit and small business, trying to take the ideas into practice, to evolving into public policy, and becoming a professional in this space to figure out how to use the levers of government to advance this mission of climate and sustainability. And now kind of pivoting, using my talents in the private sector to see how we could change finance so that we can finance change. And, all of you on this call probably know that today's nonprofit leaders are navigating a perfect storm. There is political polarization in pretty much every topic that we've devoted ourselves to. There's economic uncertainty of what's going to happen to not only ourselves and our board and our staff, but the communities that we support. Of course, there's climate disruption. That we're seeing almost on the daily in different parts of the world and certainly our own country. And there's this kind of social fragmentation that's going on in our communities, and it's something that these forces combined can actually shake and potentially dismantle some of the most mission driven organizations. But I think adversity doesn't have to derail us. And in fact, it can be the catalyst for deeper alignment with your organization and those who you serve. It could be the catalyst to drive more innovation in your organization and pivot and create new types of opportunities, and certainly to double down on the impact that started you from the first place, that wakes you up every single day, right? Today,
I think it's, yeah.
in closing, just really quickly on this, today, the whole goal of this webinar is for us to share these strategies and stories, especially from my perspective at Climate First, and help to show how staying true to your mission is essential to helping you thrive, even in these messy times. Clay, over to you.
Chris, I was, and next slide, please, Alex. Chris, I was just going to say that, I think that the adversity is necessary, right? We have come in contact with many organizations that may be someone's swan song, where they have a tremendous amount of money. They bring it to launching a nonprofit. The finances is not an issue. And the organization doesn't go through this phase of kind of paying its dues and really finding itself in the adversity. And those organizations, to me, are never as effective as the ones that have really put in the decades of blood, sweat, and tears.
And are rooted deeply into what they know their core focus and core values are, and we're going to get to that as one of the important things that you all need to align and think about as we work and navigate through some of these challenges. So this idea, right, crisis, it can actually be seen, and in fact, in the Chinese culture and in the Chinese language, there's the word crisis is split into two Sino characters. This idea of danger and opportunity. And in 2015, I had the opportunity of being trained by Vice President Al Gore as part of this climate reality leadership training program. And I remember vividly that he spoke about the climate crisis, obviously, and told us about the story of his time when he was in China and was enlightened by their culture about how this idea of crisis actually needs to be used as an opportunity, and that there's obviously a danger of inaction and this apathy despite the headwinds that we're facing. But there's also this opportunity to continue to help us thrive. And I ended up giving a Pachakasha talk on this topic. It's called the opportunity of crisis, and I used ideas for us as this shining example of how you can, even in places that are furthest from sustainability, that we're trying to support in rural Togo and Uganda and Liberia, that the opportunity to help build community and help improve quality of life is still there, and it's just amazing to see. And so I think, in short, although things might seem like a crisis, it doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity to thrive, and I think that's the real takeaway of this idea. Next slide.
Next slide.
Okay. So, when looking at how to deal with these challenges, I think it's imperative that you start with foundation of mission alignment. And that might seem obvious, but in this time, in a tumultuous time, it's not always the first thing that we think about. At Climate First Bank, our mission is crystal clear, right? We're trying to accelerate the transition to a regenerative economy through climate conscious banking. We're trying to support businesses and individuals to help use their money as a force for good. And that mission guides our decision every single day. Our chairman and founder, Ken LaRoe, our CEO, Lex Ford, they live and breathe these core values, and they help make important business decisions by ensuring that that's the route that we all come from, right? When COVID-19 hit, right, many businesses and even banks began to pull back. And for us, we were in the midst of developing a business plan and raising our first Series A, capital raise to help launch this bank. And it was in that moment when I felt that it was the perfect time. Timing, as we often talk about, is one of the most critical things. And it was the perfect time, in my opinion. We knew that the solutions to advancing climate resilience, or to supporting affordable housing, or to supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses, wasn't to shy away from this idea, but was to build a bank that was a force for good. And we leaned in. We incorporated not just as a regular business, but as a public benefit corporation. We went through the full B Corp certification process. Why is that important? Well, because for us, it's not enough or just enough to make money for our shareholders. It's also the core mission and focus to use bank as a force for good, right? And so I think we started to offer green loans for solar and energy efficiency and other forms of sustainable development. And fast forward to today, the bank has just turned 4 years old, right? We launched June 1st, 2021. And it's considered one of the fastest growing banks in America, with over 1.25 billion in assets under management in a 4-year period. This shows that
Unicorn.
being rooted, right? Exactly. Being rooted in that mission, though, helped us to get there. And I think mission alignment builds that trust, and it attracts values aligned customers and partners and employees. And I think that that's a core focus of how we get through this.
I'll say this too, Chris. It's like this isn't hokey stuff, right? To say aligning with your mission and aligning with your values, sometimes real sharp pencil executives hear woo woo.
Mm,
But I will tell you that there have been many times that ideas for us would probably not exist right now after 17 years if we were not clear on our values and what is important to us. So much, in fact, that early on in building the organization,
mm.
some of the longest, most heated debates that I ever took part in the dorm rooms, in designing the nonprofit, was
Yep.
about our values, right? Being an optimistic organization and not a doom and gloom environmental nonprofit. Ele-
Being action oriented
Being
and not
action
really
oriented is
activism oriented.
exactly, as opposed to purely activism and focusing on that action element that was so missing. And I
Hmm.
even think of times when people would fly from Manhattan to sit down with us at fancy restaurants and offer us $20 million to have a majority stake on our board when we were running the organization out of coffee shops with zero paid staff and zero money, but had gotten so much notoriety from the White House to the UN to multiple schools and places all over the country. And we said no. And we said no because we knew that it was a bunch of crap and that their values didn't align with ours, right?
Hmm.
And
When
like,
you look at companies like Patagonia, they've shut down operations to support voting rights for populations in their own communities. You look at Ben and Jerry's, who take pretty bold stances, and they still maintain this loyalty with their customers, and it's part of who they are, right? And their customers support them because of that. And so, for nonprofits, I think this means asking yourselves, are our programs and our partnerships and our fundraising strategies aligned with our core purpose and what we're essentially founded to do? And if not, adversity will expose those cracks, and it may allow you this opportunity to think about, right, the opportunity of the crisis. And last pro tip on this: Climate First Bank has begun implementing what's called an entrepreneurial operating system. You might have heard of an EOS before. This is a fantastic concept that also helps think through this core focus, and there's great information in there. It's coming out of a book called Traction, that was written by Gino Wickman, and just highly encourage you all as leaders on this call, to know about that, to know about those tools, because I think it really helps to recenter, kind of this focus on mission alignment.
next
Next
slide,
slide.
please.
So over the years, we basically, I think, have boiled down these experiences in navigating through adversity in kind of three main pillars. One is this recentering the organization and affirming that core value and focus. It will be the foundation that determines who you hire, what products you launch, and how you make tough choices in the future, as we've said. Secondly, you have this idea of leading with transparency. This is about building trust and accountability and communicating during these difficult times. That is absolutely important. And lastly, this building adaptive capacity. This is mainly the ability to foster this culture of innovation and creativity and partnership and collaboration, and kind of this mindset of resilience and the idea of evolving and adapting over time.
Next
So
slide,
we'll
please.
dive into these a little bit more. All right. Well, as the saying goes, when things get messy, go back to the mission. And this is kind of, you're going to continue to hear this as a central point of the today's conversation. At Climate First, mission is the reason of our existence. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just about making money. It's also about using this bank to solve these problems. So, ensuring this alignment, we have done a number of things, including conducting kind of mission audits on a regular basis, reviewing our lending practices, reviewing our current products and ways in which they're helping to advance the mission. How are we showing up in our community and engaging our customers, but also the communities we serve, and the internal culture to ensure that there is this alignment. I remember Clay, with ideas, our annual effort of doing this is called the IRE, the Internal Reorganization for Evolution, and it's this retreat. We come together and bring board and staff and go through that. Right, share a little bit more about kind of the IRE and how we go about handling it.
It's very important. It is essentially a chance to make everyone integrated in the decision-making process and to align everyone with, again, that North Star. Look, your organization has to aim at something, right? What are you going to do? You're going to aim at the middle, right? And be boring, right? You want to aim at something that's ridiculously exciting and challenging and difficult and lofty, right? That's what allows you to reach excellence, right? And in order to achieve that and actually hit the bullseye, you have to unify everyone, right? Most of the confusion that occurs in businesses, in organizations, comes from this deunification. It's very confusing for
Mhm.
people if they don't know what to aim at. So this alignment is tremendously important because honestly, we all know that people in the nonprofit field are underpaid and overworked. These people aren't coming to work or as board members working for free every single day because of the lavish fringe benefits they get, right? They do it because they really care. And someone can't care if they don't know where to look, and they don't know where to look if no one is pointing. So it is
Mhm.
very important for executive leadership to point in a way that aligns with your objectives and key results, your mission, all of these types of things. And we've been dedicated to doing that every single year for our organization in January so that we're aligned coming back into the new year. Usually in those first 2 weeks of January, when everyone still can't answer an email and is asleep, that's when we'll take our time
Mhm.
and work really hard at planning.
Yeah, and at these, you're asking yourselves, are we walking the walk? In why we exist? Are our staff empowered to live this mission? And how are they showing up? And how are we helping them show up to do that? How are they engaged in advancing the work, not only through the business but outside of the business? And to your point, I mean, I often talked about how ideas grew because of passion for change, and it was because of the unified mission alignment that we all had, that every person, every volunteer and member had, and those values and basically truly aligned, that ultimately allowed us to thrive, in a very nimble way.
Next
So
slide, please.
anywho, think about scheduling a quarterly mission check-in with your team. I think it could be useful as you're trying to navigate.
Yeah, and I mean that's so important because next slide, please, to pillar two. I'll just say about the monthly, quarterly mission check-ins, right? Uh, to leadership, I'll say, ask some of your mid-level staff to ask new staff, or lower level staff, or volunteers, or interns, key things about your organization. I think it'll be surprising to you. Sometimes as leadership, we get lost in the sauce of everything that we need to do, and we forget that just like stewarding donors, it's really important to steward interns and volunteers and newly hired staff and mid-level management. Otherwise, you'll find that you're standing on nothing. And
Mhm.
it's you alone there with this idea when you thought it was something that everyone else knew. So how do you take out the calendar and systematize that, right? Those are things that we are very adapt to being able to teach. All right, pillar two, take it away.
So pillar two is really about leading with transparency and empathy, and I think this all comes down to how we go about effectively communicating, across the board. Adversity is going to demand that each one of us steps up in a courageous way to lead. And transparency of the situation and the state that you're in builds trust with your staff and with your team, as well as those who you're serving. It's not always pretty, right? But at the end of the day, what this does is it builds empathy, which ultimately builds loyalty to the mission and to your organization. So this aspect of transparency leads to empathy, And as you can imagine, the recent changes, as an example of these tax credits and the incentives for clean energy, we're a bank that is trying to actually finance the transition to a decarbonized world, to one that's powered by carbon-free clean energy. And the new law that was just passed by Congress and the president will be ending a lot of these incentives by the end of this year. As a bank working in these situations, this is causing us to think about what can we do and how can we ensure that we're positioned come 2026, so that we can thrive in this new environment. And at the same time, we know that energy costs are also going to go up, and the economics of solar will only get better as these energy prices go up. And so we're trying to restructure our products in order to make sure that we could still meet the need and meet the market. And a lot of people are concerned about the solar industry or what's going to happen with climate progress. And I will let you know, just fun fact, that the transition is irresistible and it's inevitable. Over 90% of all energy that's going to be coming online across this country this year and in the years to come will be carbon free. And it's just because it's the fastest and cheapest and best sources of energy that happen to be that. And so the good news is we're going to continue to see this progress, even though we're seeing adversity and a real headwind ahead for what our core mission is trying to do. Nonprofits should be doing the same, right? This is about communicating openly to your donors, to your staff, and to your communities that you serve. And I think it's important to share the why behind these tough decisions, about what is, about how you're addressing these challenges, and ensure that you're kind of listening deeply and incorporating that feedback into, how you move forward in your organization. I remember,
And
oh, go for it, Clay.
I was just going to say, I remember in the aspect that again, this isn't like woo-woo stuff. Let me explain what happens. If you as leadership don't explain the why to your staff, they will make one up for themselves in their own minds. Human beings are meaning-making machines. We are very anxious when we don't know the meaning behind someone, or the meaning behind what is driving someone, or the meaning behind why something is occurring. And we'll put in that meaning. Maybe think back to childhood at a time when you were saddened that a parent wasn't there. And maybe in your mind as a kid, you think, my goodness, they don't love me. When really the parent was out working 2 jobs, breaking themselves in half to put food on the table. But because the parent didn't explain why they were not there, in the kid's mind, it's because they don't love you. This same thing happens with staff. This same thing happens with donors. This same thing happens with volunteers. Human beings are meaning-making machines, and they will create the why behind everything that happens. So as leadership, do not leave those gaps. You will have a disaster 18 months from now with a coup of staff on your hands, or who knows what else, or worse. The worst thing that can happen to a nonprofit organization isn't that you run out of money. Most nonprofit organizations start with no money, right? They start with a dream and a vision that someone builds up. The worst thing that can happen to a nonprofit is that nobody cares, and
Mhm.
that it's indifference that it's faced with, and the organization
Apathy.
just
Yep.
vaporizes and fizzles away.
Mhm.
So those are important things to think about. This is not woo-woo stuff. Next slide, please.
And so this third pillar, I think, is probably the most important, and it's about building this culture of adaptive capacity within your organization. Right? Resilience isn't just about weathering storms; it's about evolving and adapting, and building that within your organizations. At the bank, we've embraced this concept of digital banking, right? And even launched our own fintech subsidiary. If you go around asking banks what they actually think about, fintechs and the digitization of currency and money, they think it's an existential crisis. But as a bank, we have, identified that this is an opportunity for us, and we've embraced it wholeheartedly. We've embraced remote work in a hybrid world, right? We know that that's really challenging and it's becoming the norm. There's a kind of a lot of back and forth, but that was a really important thing. And also new financial products. There aren't many institutions that are trying to use, our collective deposits to finance things like solar loans or green home equity lines. These are the things that are setting us apart and have allowed us to kind of build a robust company, quite frankly. Now, nonprofits can also build this same type of adaptive capacity by piloting new programs, new types of initiatives, diversifying revenue streams. Right, Ideas for Us just launched a new plant, edible and native plant nursery for the organization to help think about how do we support our community and in meeting that mission as well as ours, and then collaborating across sectors. I'm something that I learned from Mayor Dyer, and I think the reason why Orlando has progressed so well over the last 2 decades is because of this culture of collaboration and partnership that he's instilled down to the individual staff person in the city. And I think that shows, right? It has proven to be true. So don't be afraid to experiment. I think too often we are because of this aspect of failure, but ultimately that will lead to new potential opportunities and hopefully encourage innovation in your team so that your nonprofit can be more resilient to future shocks and stressors and environments and things that you're having to deal with.
This is an important muscle to exercise before you need it, right? Having a stuffy, do it by the book organization that's, 45 years old, and all of a sudden tough times in 2008 or 2025 or 2020 come along, and now all of a sudden it has to be innovative and resilient. That's a tough nut to crack. Right. And remember, resilience, especially in our world of sustainability is kind of like the bare minimum, right? It's like something that is just sustainable. It's able to sustain, right? It's the one rung less on the ladder and it's doomed, right? So sustainability is the bare minimum. What you really want is resilience, right? Which is this bounce back ability, right? Why did certain states fare better than others economically during COVID? Right? Why do certain cities bounce back from natural disasters quicker? Why do certain nonprofits survive these shocks as opposed to others? Well, it comes down to resilience. That is more of an engineering and behavioral solution in the form of what leadership does. You have to engineer these elements into your organization, and you have to routinely integrate and practice them with your staff. Otherwise, you're asking for miracles when difficulty comes if you have never done this with your staff before.
As we often say, it's like building a muscle, right? And you can't expect that muscle to be strong and ready to go when the crap hits the fan. And so the idea here is that scenario planning and doing workshops with your staff. This is really important to think about what those are. Figuring out stakeholder mapping and identifying new forms of cross-functional collaborations and partnerships. This is how you can weather the storm, so to speak, and ensure that you're diverse. I mean, one of the things we spoke about Ideas for Us is the diversity of the initiatives, and in any ecosystem, the more diverse it is, the stronger it is, the more resilient it is, the more pathways of energy that it has ultimately, and that at the end of the day is the reason why diversity creates thriving ecosystems. How do we apply that same concept of nature into our work? That's exactly what we need to be thinking about, and this is an example of a great synergy there.
All right, next slide. Okay, great. So I want to talk a little bit about as leadership, especially from a macro level in your organization, how do you put some of this to use, right? Well, there is an unknown that is out there and it is called chaos. And that chaos happens all through nature, all through the reality we live in. And as far as we know from physics, it exists in the multiverse as well. And what I mean by that is you may have a bunch of stardust out there swirling around as chaos, but with a little bit of order, it has the potential to turn into you, me, and our organizations. Well, the same thing is happening all the time with your nonprofit. And there is a ABC framework for strategic focus. And most people don't even know that this exists. So here's a little tidbit to help today. In your organization, if you were to divide your time as to what the organization at a macro level is focusing on, here is a healthy way to never become boring and to be able to offset the chaos into opportunity. right? Because that's what we want to do. We don't want to amplify the chaos to more chaos. We want to turn that into opportunity. So for starters, let's start with the A in the ABC and move down, right? So the A is the aspirational tier, right? The top of the pyramid, right? If you spend 20% of your time on innovation and growth and talk about the big issues in your sector, maybe you're dealing with helping kids who don't have food make sure that they get fed, right? You would then be creating media and content, educational materials, getting write-ups in newspapers and things about the purpose of your organization and how you're pushing the envelope or serving as a thought leader around those things. You have to drive presence in the media. That's extraordinarily important, or people don't know you exist. And thankfully now in the modern world, we have our own media channels that we command as opposed to just ones that other people own, right? So this is the aspect of social and self media. So this is tremendously important. And you want to focus 20% of your time always in reaching and being aspirational to the things that inspire people and bring them into your organization. The second tier of bread and butter, this is 60%. This is your core operations and your moneymaker. And essentially, this is project marketing, right? When you tell stories about, hey, we built, let's see, Ideas for Us has now built over 65 gardens at schools in Orange County Public Schools. The results and outcome and news and media and fanfare and amazing stories with kids, that is absolutely bread and butter tier as far as that marketing aspect goes. And that's tremendously important to talk about and to focus on and to perfect. But there doesn't need to be a whole lot of innovation there, right? The innovation is happening on the extreme sides of the triangle. Now, the very bottom, the chaos tier, right, is something that many people don't even include. They just focus on, okay, aspirational tier, what's next? And what do we reach for publicly and internally? And we'll focus on what we're great at, and that's it. Well, guess what happens to organizations like that? 20, 30 years down the road, they have no new board members that want to join. They have no interns. They look around. Everyone is, been there for a long time. Maybe the organization has, 5 likes on their posts kind of thing, and it just doesn't have the pizzazz. Why? Are they not doing great bread and butter programs? They probably are. Are they also being aspirational and thought leaders on what they do? Well, they've been around 35, 40 years. They probably are, but they're not transmutating the chaos into opportunity. And that is where the organization is experimenting, and it is out there creating future core operations and future money makers for the next months and years. And that will be its future institutional and future project marketing. So very often this freedom to innovate and to dream and to do things that are outside of the norm is only left for either the very experimental organizations or for when you've got an extra 5 million bucks in the endowment and you don't have anything to worry about. But I am telling you that you cannot allow that to happen. Always at Ideas for Us, we are playing this triangle. And we are making sure to constantly be looking to do new things outside of the norm of what people imagine conventional nonprofits in our sector of environmentalism and sustainable development would be doing. We go into arts and into music. Chris is in finance, for heaven's sake, in the aspect that most people think that the economy is at odds with the environment, when that couldn't be farther than the truth. More rich wealth of money and natural resources can be created through the economy than anything else, right? So this is an important thing for us to realize. You have to play this full triangle. Next slide, please. All right, and we're going to go into some Q&A here in just a second, but I do want to just kind of bring some of these important aspects to you all. So let's just bring it full circle. Crisis is a high-stakes situation that we don't know the answer to, also known as rapid innovation under stress embedded in fear. And that is really what you were
It's a good
doing.
way to put it.
Thank you so much. And that is a real thing in the fact that you have to make a decision and that you are most likely faced with fear because you've been pushed into the corner and you're having to use that innovation muscle. So what are these two essential tips for you? Number one, be brutally honest, right? Be brutally honest with yourself as leadership, number one, right? Hide from nothing. And don't let anything hide in the fog, right? Run the numbers, live in the spreadsheets, don't hide from the things that make you feel uncomfortable, and be brutally honest with yourself, your team, your donors. Acknowledge a reality without sugarcoating the challenges ahead.
Including some of the staff challenges that you might be facing, right? Some of those are the hardest to deal with, but are some of the most important.
For sure. Tip two here that's essential, right, is offer a rational basis for hope, right? And I said this in the beginning, hope is not a strategy, but it is a resource. And as leadership, the number one job, I will say this again, as leadership, your number one job is to show your team reality and offer hope. And that is how you get through crisis. When everybody rallies behind a true pathway out being honestly shown, you've got a way better chance of making it through than just winging it. So we have to think as leaders, right, in these kind of scenarios as to who are we when we're in peril, right? Who are you as the leader, as the board, as the COO, right? Who are you when you're in peril and who do you want to be, right? And do you embody that in your organization, right? My staff knows that I show up first and stay the longest. I lead by example. That is definitely one of the things that I do. And I also am someone who is tremendously honest with them. And they know that they can believe me when I say that I'm going to do something and when I also am explaining to them the reality of situations. To me, those are sacred and are a reason
Yep.
why the wheels stay on the bus. So next slide, please.
So yeah, just in closing here, I think one of the last things I wanted to share is around kind of trying to find common ground in these polarizing environments. And as you can imagine, the environment and climate change are high on that list of polarizing topics. But just remember that they are not insurmountable to get around. And cutting through this noise comes down to shared values. Things like economic opportunity and health and safety are all things that environmental values align with. And it's just not often how it's communicated. But getting down to the brass tacks is how you get through that. At Climate First, we serve both progressive urban centers and conservative rural communities who don't care as much about climate or might see it as a political thing. And how? Well, we've focused on this idea of the shared values: energy independence, community resilience, economic opportunity, affordability, helping to lower cost on people and create new job opportunities and job growth in these communities. These are all things that come with investing in the things that we care about as the bank, and aren't a sort of snake oil that comes with this idea of sustainability. So it's really about understanding those shared values. And I think nonprofits can do the same, right? Use that inclusive language, use storytelling and humanizing the issues, and highlight real people impacted by your work. Because ultimately, that's how donors, that's how foundations ultimately open the pocket, the pocketbook, so to speak, and contribute and support the mission that you're doing. So yeah, hopefully, that's helpful in thinking about ways to find that common ground, creating those safe spaces for dialogue, and ultimately, using a polarizing environment as a way to catalyze radical collaboration and partnership. And I think we are in a position where we can do that.
Again, just to rehash on how deeply strategic this stuff is and how non-woo-woo it is. Let's just say the storytelling aspect, right? Just as a tip, you may want to, as a nonprofit leader, sit with your team when you have an all-staff meeting and literally take them through 3 or 4 stories that you want them to know of how your organization has affected or helped people. That will stick into their mind and be something that they can repeat and share with other people. And stories stick. I am an academic, and if you can't tell, I love talking and teaching, but that is a way of learning that is barely 300 years old. People learn through stories. We always have. We learn through stories, we learn through songs, we learn through spoken word. That is how our brains have been wired to learn and to retain information.
Mm.
So use that to your advantage. If you need to communicate your values and how you want the organization to be in the world, don't shy away from stories and don't shy away from this very important internal communication. It's very embarrassing for nonprofits when I come into a situation and I'm working with clients and I ask their staff basic questions about the organization and they have no idea and they've worked there 5 years, right? That's a real thing that happens all the time. So these are important things to keep in mind. Next slide, please. All right. Well, we're going to start with the Q&A here because we want to talk to you all. Chris and I could literally talk for probably the next 4 hours about this stuff. We really had to muzzle ourselves to get through here in the time period. But just to let everybody know here, I would love to speak with you. Mission Impact Strategies is a dynamic group. And as you've seen through the past Impact Labs, we have some really talented people bringing all kinds of perspectives to the table. One of the best things about working with our impact strategists is that you get our brains and our experience, and you don't have to go and spend all of the decades to learn it yourself. This is a shortcut for you to be able to reach for greater excellence in these difficult times. So please, if you'd like to connect, reach out to us at connect@missionimpactstrategies.com. I'm going to be offering a free 30-minute strategy session along with my peers, or myself. You can request whatever it is you like. But we're here to hear what you have to say and to genuinely try to help. If we don't think we can help, we will certainly tell you. But we have had a tremendous amount of success of extraordinary organizations that were already great, but have now been able to really find the foundation that they need to push themselves forward. So very, very important stuff. And I look forward to speaking and hearing from many of you. And with that, let's start right now. So next slide, please. I think that's our Q&A slide. And Alex, I will turn it back over to you, I guess, if you want to feed some questions or Amy. But Chris and I are here for the remainder of the call to answer anything we can.
Yeah, I just want to thank both you guys. I got so much out of that. And then one of the biggest reminders to me is that leadership really matters. It is important to have a great strategy. It is important to be on mission. But when things are perfect, the macro conditions, they say, management will do. Leadership's needed during challenging times. That's why there's the market for leadership. And I think you
Yep.
really touched on some of the things that are just so critical during tough times. And we're all in that same age where we've led through, the financial crisis, COVID, whatever now is going to be called. I'm sure it'll have a name, right? Eventually. And who knows what's to come. And so all those adventures, whether it's leading nonprofit or in my case, representing big companies during those times, shapes you incredibly, but it strengthens you for the next round, whatever that's going to be. So, to both of you, I want to thank you for how you packaged that up and really digestible, actionable bits for our audience to be able to take. And I think, especially the internal leadership, I think that we as organizational leaders are thinking about external stakeholders a lot, right? And that's so critical. But there is the danger, right? There is that danger of losing sight of what's so important, those that are under your charge, whether volunteer or paid employee, and to never take for granted the fact that they are feeling what you feel and they know what you know. Really, super, you, we never need to, there's never an over reminding of that because you can
Yep.
continually lose sight
Good
of that
point.
in the busyness of external leadership. So I
And
just
it's
wanted to
often
just,
out of sight, out of mind, right? We often we leave that last. We're trying to deal with the external pressures, but not really think about the importance of the internal aspect. And so, yeah, it was a really important point, Alex.
You,
yeah,
you
no,
you have to spin plates while juggling on the unicycle, right? And that's just what has to happen because the top of the triangle is just as important as the bottom of the triangle, right? And especially in our hierarchies of our organization, right? These are things that are very, very important. A demotivated board
Mm.
can be just as catastrophic as staff not having a policy in place and posting a bunch of inflammatory things about geopolitical things in the world on social media and damaging the nonprofit or damaging the company, right? All of that is exactly what we're talking about. And we're very good at understanding what are the type of steps someone can make from internal policies to internal training to thwart that stuff, right? It's very, very important. One of the major things in I'll just briefly share this and then we'll jump to some questions. But one of the major things in ideas for us that we worked through was a vaccine policy around COVID. And there were our staff was split down the middle. Some were very adamant about
Very tough.
getting the vaccine. Others were very anti-vaccine. And what we realized as leadership, thank goodness, was that everyone just wanted to be given the option to freely choose for themselves. And the way that I explained to the staff that wanted to make it mandatory, where we would fire someone if they didn't get vaccinated, was I said, look, Ideas for Us is a United Nations accredited NGO. We're the only one in Central Florida that has UN access to Geneva, Manhattan, and Vienna. If you look at the Declaration of Human Rights, Article 4 of the Declaration of Human Rights is body autonomy. And I said, no matter what we may personally think as leadership about any of these things, I'm not breaking the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And therefore, everyone will have the freedom to decide whether they get vaccinated or not. And 100% of our staff freely chose to become vaccinated. Even the naysayers. I was blown away, shocked that this was the turn that it took. But I share that in confidence because it's an example of how sometimes your staff just wants the respect of not being told what to do and having a line in the sand. And that's really important for leadership to honor.
Hmm.
no, that's great stuff. And we are actually at time, which is always my least favorite thing to have to be the bearer of news because this has flown by like 2 seconds. And Chris, we love just having you a part of the greater Mission Impact Strategies family.
Indeed.
Hope you're down for a brainstorm strategy session offline sometime. I'd love to pick
Always.
your brain some more and just man, just congrats on being so committed to your own personal mission. The macro conditions will always change. Pendulums will swing back and forth. Those pendulums seem more dramatic these days than they did when we were youngsters. They
Hmm.
really do. But they will continue to do that. But if you're so committed like you to your own personal mission, you'll find another way to drive it forward. And it may be
Yep.
in a different entity, in a different way, but you'll still push that forward in a positive way. And I
Appreciate
think
that,
that's something
Alex.
we can all, that's inspiring, my friend.
As a
Um,
surfer, the waves are always going to come, but what we can do is learn how to surf. We
hey,
could
that's
ride that wave. We could do everything and make the moment of that particular second in time. Make the most of what you can, knowing that there's another wave that's coming behind us. But the mission
oh
is
man.
rooted, and we're going to jump off the next one, and we're off to the next wave coming at us.
Or
Everybody needs to learn how to surf in that
or,
respect.
or you or you scuba dive and you don't have to worry about the waves.
Either way, we're Florida centric. We like all of that. And
True.
speaking of
Alex,
Florida centric here,
just real quick, Alex, before you introduce our next fantastic Impact Lab coming up on September 18th, I just very briefly just want to touch on a couple things in the chat here. So, Mission Impact Strategies is not formally tied to Climate First Bank. Climate First Bank is its own entity that we brought in to get some wisdom and experience from, especially in the sector that they're in. Certainly, voting with your dollar matters and choosing where you bank matters. So if you're interested in learning more about Climate First Bank, we're going to share Chris's direct contact information. And we're also going to share, of course, you can just Google Climate First Bank as well and find information there. They have a bunch of wonderful programs for nonprofits if that's something someone is interested in. Also, I just want to state as well that Mission Impact Strategies does not assist in direct fundraising per se, right? Where we go out and win grants or pitch to funders for you. We are more so focusing on the strategy and the details and the readiness that you need in order to be successful, because ultimately most donors are looking for the same thing, that you're competent and that you have the capacity and the vision, and most importantly, the heart to pull off what you're trying to do. So we coach people in making that aspect possible. And then lastly, there's an anonymous attendee here who is sharing the cash flow difficulty issues that they're facing right now. And to that individual, gentleman or lady, I will say, we feel you. And these are tough times right now. I would suggest being honest with the people that have pledged with you and have not yet paid. And if they are not able to pay, ask them to introduce you to 5 people each who may be able to help you. See if they're willing to pick up the telephone, make some phone calls, make some introduction. And of course, this is where innovation comes into play. Ideas for Us has 15 revenue models. Grants is one of them, right? So that is another thing we teach at Mission Impact Strategies, is understanding business model and expanding all of the revenue models that you have, so that a downturn in giving, foundational giving, or giving from large money individuals isn't a death sentence. Because I saw so many of my colleagues who receive 90% of their funding from federal grants get those grants funding and lay off 40 people or shutter their doors. That's not sustainable. So those are the kinds of things we're going to be able to help you with. So I think that touched on the questions. And Alex, I'll toss it back to you.
Yeah. Well, Clay, thanks for underscoring that. We have heard so many difficult stories around that, and we can help, and we've got a passion and obviously an expertise on it. So a little less than a month from now, super excited. Our next Impact Lab will be on September 18th. A dear friend of mine, one of my favorite Florida-based leaders, Imran Siddiqui. He is the newly appointed CEO of South Florida's Tech Hub. He's been sharing how collaboration, talent, and partnerships are powering South Florida's rise as a tech hub, and what that means for companies, our governments, the nonprofit sector, and talent. And it's super relevant to everyone, but to get a sense how this new leader of this new, actually a long established organization, new leader is seeing his work and the mission of this organization in this new world. So more to come. We'll be sending out the link to sign up there, but be sure to block out that hour on September 18th. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Clay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Amy, and everyone out there in our audience. Thank you for dedicating your careers to making communities stronger and putting in the time to make yourself better so you can make your organizations better. We appreciate you and look forward to seeing you at our next Impact Lab. And reach out if you need us. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you all.